I always felt like I was living a whole different life. And that disconnection to myself and from myself, I feel like is one of the biggest traumas that someone can experience. Anxiety is based off of fearing something that hasn't happened yet, right? So we have this worry or thought about the future. And for me, I also think of anxiety as like fear of something that hasn't happened yet, but also fear of feeling an emotion. Curiosity is such a remedy. When you explore with curiosity, there's so much more expansion in the ways that these energies show up, and that it completely takes away their power over us.
Christine Marie, welcome back to the show. So good to have you here. We were just chatting in the pre-show about what's most alive for us right now, just what we're noticing in ourselves, in our inner circles, um, and then maybe beyond that in the collective as a whole. So, I'd like to open up by inviting you to share what you spoke to earlier about some intimate conversations you had with your friends around
Mhm.
vulnerability and
Mhm.
how that is the fear of vulnerability is present and how to move through that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today and everyone here listening. Yeah, so this past weekend, I just had a really lovely experience with just being with two girlfriends, and we were in Bend at a music festival, and we had lots and lots and lots of time to just share and be honest with so many different things that were going on in our lives individually, and how that impacts, how we show up in a day-to-day level. And the one topic that I feel like we kept coming back to was this topic of vulnerability, and the amount of courage and bravery that it takes to actually be vulnerable and transparent in our everyday lives and with those that we love and that are closest to us. I know for me, vulnerability has been one thing that I actually feel like is a superpower of mine. I feel like I'm pretty open with my feelings and my thoughts and my emotions. But that doesn't mean I still don't get vulnerability hangovers where like I'll share something so raw and open, and then like, after the conversation is over, I'm just like I feel so exposed. I feel so raw. I feel so yeah, just there is still this level of fear that what if they're judging me? What if they see me differently? What if like it's always about how someone else perceives me? But as I've been on this path of healing and transformation, I really feel that like I feel the closest to my loved ones and the people around me when there is this level of vulnerability there. Because when I think of vulnerability, I think of also authenticity. And a a fact I just learned about authenticity is that it's 4,000 times stronger of a vibration than love. And so it's even that much greater of like an energy. And I totally understand why. It's for me, authenticity, it's like if someone shows up in their authentic self, where they're not trying to people please, where they're not trying to, get me to, like them or see them in a certain way, but they're just completely honest and fully themselves. Like the the way that I feel when I'm around that type of energy is just alive and human, and like this feeling of being worthy just for being who I am, where I am at any given moment. And so, I just think about how with my friends, there's another level of vulnerability that I think can be so challenging, because I feel like for me, I've had a lot of wounding with especially female friendships in the past. Like when I think about high school or college, where, I wanted to be liked, I wanted to be accepted, I wanted to belong. And in order to do that, I had to kind of I thought I had to change who I was in order to fit in, but I never felt connected to myself. I always felt like I was living a whole different life. And that disconnection to myself and from myself, I feel like is one of the biggest traumas that someone can experience. And so there's just been this whole path to coming back to me and just being okay with being different or unique or having just like just having a sense of uniqueness that is my imprint that has nothing to do with comparing myself to other people and other women especially. So anyways, I want to pause there because I know I just brought up a lot. So I want to just take a moment to hear what's coming up for you as I shared all of that.
So much. I'm so fascinated by the quantification of that, like that vibration of, that feeling, that energy state of authenticity, as compared to feeling loved. I do think there is something so powerful there, and it's bringing up for me. I think it was Dr. Gabor Mate who pointed out that this is one of the fundamental needs of every human is this expression of authenticity, being their authentic self. And so it feels like right now the search is on for what authenticity really is. I think part of you and I working in the psychedelic medicine space, like we of course have gone on this journey of stripping away or deconditioning ourselves from certain expectations that we place on ourselves, interpreting, this, creating these expectations, projecting them from other people onto ourselves and waking up to is what is going on. And so and seeing how it's not in alignment with what actually makes us feel good, it's not in alignment with how we would like to show up ourselves maybe. And so there's a process of unwinding that. And it's a challenging process. I think it's so hard to discern what is coming from our authentic self. But actually, I would say that that is one of the core challenges I move through probably day to day. I think that is a one way to really distill it down is um expressing my authentic self and trusting that it's coming from my heart or from for me, I don't even trust my own heart all the time. I trust something greater than me to move through me and to like not worry so much about how my personal ego is distorting what wants to move through me. And for me, it's like through acts of service, through my work primarily is where I get the most we were touching on the energy of anxiety earlier, but like what brings me the most anxiety is maybe over analyzing, overthinking, being overly concerned about how I express myself and inquiring, like always in a self inquiry of like, is this true? Is this right? Is this good? Is this um uh or am I falling prey to what I think people want from me or going after any of the other ways that we are kind of evolutionarily programmed to be concerned about as social animals, as social creatures. So yeah, but then when you have had that experience of being your authentic self, moving through the exercise of being vulnerable to do that because you're scared and shit about what people are going to say about you or think about you or any of that stuff. Um, and then you take that leap of faith and you do step out of your own box of your own sort of mental prison it can be. And then you have it received and actually reflected. It's incredible. It's the best feeling in the world as you're just like, wow. And while you may lose some people along the way, I'm always saying like, we're not meant to resonate with everybody. We're not a one note that would be a one note symphony. We're meant to be this, diverse array of human expression. Um, but when you do find the other souls that you resonate with, um, that is the most incredible feeling, and I think also just so critical to health, your vitality. Um, so yeah, that's definitely what's coming up when you share that. And but the next question I want to ask you, or at least a question that it brings up for me, is exploring vulnerability, because I do, and also this idea of a vulnerability hangover. I think that is like I think so many people who are, yeah, like this resonates. I want to be my more authentic self. I'm tired of putting on this fake persona that's just slowly killing me inside. Ready to just like wave my freak flag every once in a while or be like a weirdo. And then let's say you are, or it doesn't even have to be that out there, but you're just like speaking from your heart and unfiltered, um, in a social setting. I find that for me, I experience it more maybe with relationships that I'm exploring, what usually like a deepening friendship. Like these days, I have my husband, my intimate romantic partner. I don't have vulnerability hangovers with him anymore. I might have towards the beginning of our relationship. But for me, it manifests more in exploring friendship, let's say, growing friendships with people. And and yeah, what is it exactly? How would you describe a vulnerability hangover?
Oh, man. I totally hear you in that with like the new friendships, exploring that and how I completely feel the same way. Especially as I've been like calling in my tribe, especially of women who I feel so connected to right now. So I feel like I'm surrounded by so many amazing and powerful women that have now become my friends. And like, it's just such a blessing. But yeah, coming back to the vulnerability hangover, I think it's like for me, I'll just speak how it feels like on a somatic and a heart level of say you and I had a beautiful day together. I mean, and anytime we are together, it is just like we go right to the depth, where I feel like we are swimming in the underworld over and over and over again with our conversations. And it's so lovely, but like it's also very it is vulnerable, it is scary because what happens then is that after we have a very deep conversation, then I'm like, we leave our hangout or connection, and then I'm kind of ruminating on like, did I say like too much? Did I overshare? What is she thinking? Am I like, is she, I'm like overly concerned about your opinion of me because I'm afraid that maybe me being vulnerable and sharing from my heart or truth will change your opinion of me that's more negative. And I know that that's more of a projection of my own insecurities that I put on other people. And then but that's the risk, right? It's like, well, if we are authentic, if we are vulnerable, and those that we are in communion with can't accept that without judging us, without shaming us, in their own, of course, not, not in the moment, but when we take some space and there's just like, there's a level of trust that's built upon that. And trust is something that's built over time. And when you're just starting to make new friends and start to build a relationship with, you don't really know what you can or who you can trust. And so there is a level of risk there. And something that I've learned is that, well, if I share my most vulnerable pieces and you, as an individual cannot hold that, or there's something that doesn't work for you within that, then it doesn't resonate and it doesn't align. And that shows me that it's not something that's bad or wrong with you or bad or wrong with me, but there's a misconnection there that then allows me to say, okay, well, we tried, we gave it our best. And, maybe this isn't a friendship or connection I want to continue to explore or to work on because I'm not feeling met there, and
Hmm.
so it's just it's a trusting in that, and then it's a trusting in, well, if this person isn't meant for me to be friends with, then I will find others that will be able to meet me in that level and also will be able to hold all of the different pieces about me. And then as I can trust them to do that for me, then they can trust me to do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this like energy of reciprocity that I really love to expand in my relationships. And I know also when other people that I'm connecting with are vulnerable, it allows me to feel safe to be vulnerable. And I get that compliment all the time around people that say, you're so inhibited, you're so just brave to share so much of yourself and your truth. And for me, it's like, well, I know what happens when I suppress it or keep it in. It literally makes me sick, like physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so I would rather take the risk to share than to suppress, because I know that no matter what, that's going to ultimately be positive for me and possibly the person I'm sharing deep and intimate conversations with.
Yeah, that so really when looking at this fear of vulnerability, or I think there's fear of vulnerability on the front end of the interaction, and then there's the so-called vulnerability hangover on the back end of of the interaction. And really, uh, really, there's no reason to have this fear. It sounds like you're saying, because in the end, when you're your authentic self and you share, and it doesn't necessarily resonate with another person with where they're at, just for whatever reason, or they pass judgment on it, or it's just not a right fit, right? The
Mhm.
relationship, that is a good thing to discover. That's what you want to know ahead of time. That you don't want to have to bend and mold and or don a mask in some way in order to have a relationship with this person, because in the end, that will just end up being a shallow relationship that won't give you what we actually are all seeking in relationship, which is deep connection. And so it's impossible to feel deep connection with someone when that connection is not coming from an authentic place. And so don't be afraid to, there's no need to be afraid to feel so-called, I don't know. I think what people are most afraid of is rejection or unrequited connection, where you might love what you're learning and hearing about with the other person, but for whatever reason, they don't feel the same way in return. Um, and so that can, I think, elicit feelings of rejection in some way. I know I've felt that in the past, just growing up. I think it's just I almost feel like it's a part of every human's emotional maturation to move through some sort of unrequited love in some way, whether it's in a friendship or romantic interest, family members, anything where you're seeking that connection and not getting it in return. How would you counsel a friend or a
Mhm.
client who is experiencing that?
I feel like there's this there's this saying that I may just share as a mentor. Like, I would rather be rejected for being who I am than being accepted for who I am not. It's plain and simple, just like that. And the more that I can accept who I am, the more, or like the less I will care about what other people think, or their opinions of me, their judgments of me. And like, I just feel like that has so much power in it when you can see it that way. And then you can kind of bring yourself to remember that when you're going into maybe putting a mask on. Or there's a poem I wrote for my next book, and it's about like wearing a costume that doesn't fit. Like, I'm just trying on all these costumes and like nothing fits, and I feel like I'm just covering up my truth more and more, and it feels terrible. Like, so yeah, I'd just leave it there, but that's how I would share or mentor somebody going through that, because that's something that I say to myself.
So the next thing I wanted to explore that we talked about was anxiety manifests in, I feel like we have some idea of how it manifests in the mind, but just in the mind, in the body, mentally, emotionally, physically. Can you share a little bit of how you think about, yeah, how anxiety manifests?
I feel like for me, what I've come to uncover about anxiety, it's like anxiety is based off of fearing something that hasn't happened yet, right? So we have this worry or thought about the future. And for me, I also think of anxiety as like fear of something that hasn't happened yet, but also fear of feeling an emotion. So it's like if I'm having anxiety around, let me just give an example, around my partner leaving me. Well, okay, that's of course terrible. But I'm I'm almost certain that I'm not so much afraid of the abandonment, but I'm afraid of how I'm going to feel, how the abandonment will make me feel. And so what I've learned is like continuing to understand if that is something that I am afraid of, well, then it's developing self trust that no matter what happens, I've got me. I've got me. And not only do I've got me, but I have my guides, my spiritual, support team that I've developed such a deep and close relationship with that I can always call on whenever I need support and that I am not going to be alone at any given time that there is a challenge. And so something that also has been kind of sitting at my heart is so my father just passed away in March, and I've been having a lot of dreams about my mother dying. And my mother and I have become more close within the last year than any part of my life. And it's been such a blessing. And I attribute that to just so much of the healing work I've been doing with plant medicines in so many ways. And now I've been noticing this anxiety of her death. And it's like, yeah, of course I'm going to miss my mom and that's going to suck when that happens. But I'm actually just afraid of the emptiness or maybe the guilt or these different emotions that I might feel if they were to happen once she dies. And so it's working with those emotions and working with developing a sense of trust that even if those emotions came up, that no matter what, like I'm resilient and I'm comfortable now with being with discomfort so much that I know no matter what happens, like I will be okay.
Yeah, anxiety is, sometimes I think of it as a survival response. Like there's some threat to your survival in some way, whether it's, yeah, through a relationship or a job or however it manifests. Usually it's one of those, health, wealth, and relationships. Those are the three categories that most people are concerned with, and that are anxiety, induce anxiety in people. And all of those really boil back down to our survival. Um and so just recognizing that, like, about how that can feel under some sort of threat, I think, and allowing it to become an empowering thing where your survival actually, examining whether or not your survival actually does depend on X, Y, or Z
Mhm.
circumstance. And this is an exercise I feel like I went through when I was in my late 20s, and I had just moved to across the country. I was living alone for the first time in my life. Um didn't have any close family or friends in LA, and felt like that was a great time of, that was sort of the beginning of my awakening, because I um really started to examine, like, yeah, what does motivate me? What does, yeah, I what if I don't find, for me, what was the most anxiety provoking thing at the time was finding like a life, feeling like I wanted to find a life partner.
Mhm.
In fact, I still have recurring dreams of this. That's how potent that existential anxiety was for me at the time. This is almost 10 years ago now. And for me, yeah, finding a life partner, wondering if I was going to have children, these major life events, that I was wondering if they were going to happen for me or not. And yeah, incredibly anxiety provoking. And yet there's nothing to do when it comes to solving that problem. It's not like I could just like set my goals, check off the boxes, like give me something to do. I will go out and do it. And it's not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to have. It's a journey to go on, those things. And I quickly, in order to get some relief from the anxiety, I had to face off with the reality of those things not happening for me that I so desperately desired. And this is where I feel like Buddhism just resonates so deeply with me, with desire being at the root of all suffering and the attachment to certain desires, and how the answer to that is actually letting go of that desire. And I think when I was really a lot younger, my early 20s, when I first came across Buddhism, that didn't resonate with me much at all at the time. I was like, if I let go of my desire, then how am I going to work towards that goal? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then I'm just not going to experience the things that I want to experience. But it was actually in the like like realizing what was actually at stake there, which is boils down to the feeling state of like, how am I going to feel? Like, am I going to be
Mhm.
happy? Is my happiness contingent on, this or that circumstance? And by that point in my life, I had realized that, I had attached my happiness and or my really I think what we're actually chasing is inner peace and not happiness. I think it's feeling of peace, being okay with the uncertainty and change, which is the nature of life, is actually what a lot of us are seeking. And so when I asked or actually rather when I reflect on, like, I always attach my inner peace to becoming a doctor. I was like, oh, I just have to, once I have to work really hard. If I study, I'd get so much anxiety with my, with schoolwork, my exams. If I just, study hard enough and get into a good college, then I'll be good. And then it was like, oh, if I just study hard enough and just get into medical school, then I'll be good. Like, I'll be through. And then once I was in medical school, still anxious as fuck. It's like, oh, if I just get into the super competitive specialty I want, then I'll be golden. Like, I'll be on track. Like, I can just sail through the rest of life. And then it's like, and then what's interesting is like going through the exercise of achieving like each of those things. And then maybe just momentarily feeling some sort of peace or happiness, contentment, whatever it is, and then how quickly that degrades. And then you're just like back at your new baseline. And I think that helped a lot when I was reflecting on, like, yeah, what if I don't find a life partner? What if I don't have children? Or whatever the thing I most fear, what will happen to me? And if you don't, if it's unexamined, it can feel like you're going to die. It can feel like, yeah, your survival, your very survival is at risk here. And then when you go into it and realize, like, oh wow, no, I actually am capable of not succumbing to whatever my subconscious is worried about happening. Um, and it's an incredibly empowering move to take, to realize that your inner peace or your happiness, your contentment is not contingent on uh outside of your material needs being met, right? We're a little higher up on Maslow's hierarchy right now. Like we're making sure that, yeah, your basic needs are met. Now what? And how liberating that is. That and it's actually in that process of letting go of the desire, not holding on to it so much and like almost trying to force it to happen, that the thing that you most desired ends up manifesting. It's just like, it's just so wild how that, and I've been experimenting with that now mode of being in the last, the first 10 years of adulthood. I was like, set this goal, achieve this, da, 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 da. It's been a process of experimenting with what happens when I relax a little and realize that, these various things we're talking about, and just take care of me no matter what is happening, which is, like I'm feeding my vessel well. I am, whatever the current practice is, yoga, journaling, meditation, dance, anything, the thing that helps you, the embodiment practices, the mindset practices, the artistic expression, the all of these other things, then everything takes care of itself after that. And everything else is downstream of that. It's so hard to sometimes, with some of my clients, at least when they're in the beginning stages of like recognition and this self-awareness, to highlight this without it feeling like I think like the tricky part is having it not be received like you're not doing enough. It's like another expression of not doing enough. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? Like for at least the way that I put it with my clients is that, look, if you're struggling right now with anxiety and yes, you've identified like working now, you'd like to work with plant medicines. Wonderful. We're going to explore that. And there is benefit to this period of preparing our vessel, mind and body and soul, for that experience that will become vital in the integration period after. And so how are you sharing with your clients, sort of, especially maybe ones who are working through anxiety, what is the best way to prepare to address that anxiety once and for all, to really like
Put it to bed.
to at least, get a handle on it? Because when I do compare myself to, I don't think you're ever cured of such a thing, because it is part of our survival mechanisms, like we were talking about. But when I look at my mind today compared to how it was, before I went through this whole process, this 10 years of working with psychedelics and healing and awakening, it's just like night and day. My mental state and, of course, physical, emotional state, all of it is one and the same. We make these sort of somewhat artificial distinctions. But yeah, how would you counsel a client of yours?
Well, there's so many things I want to kind of touch back on, and then it will definitely bleed into what I'm about to share in response to your question. But so much of what you shared around like being goal oriented or solution oriented or needing to have a certain outcome is a very masculine way of approaching life and wholeness and health. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think there's so much value in that. But when that is overpowering the ways in which we're just going to be with our experience, be in the mystery, explore the journey in that more feminine way of healing, I feel like we have such a imbalance of that in our culture. I mean, you and I both know this is why we talked about being so passionate about doing women's groups, because we are here to bring back the more feminine way of being and have more of a balance between the two. And so for my clients, it's like, if there is something that is showing up for them, and say it's anxiety, it's honestly just really being with and opening up the container to explore, well, what does this anxiety have? Like, what is it showing me? Why is it here? Really having a conversation with it and using curiosity as medicine versus fear, because curiosity is such a remedy. When you explore with curiosity, there's so much more expansion in the ways that these energies show up, and that it completely takes away their power over us. And something that I continue to practice myself, and that I teach with, whether we are sitting with the medicines or we are just, doing a one-on-one healing session, it's like doing your best to get out of the mind, because the ego really wants to be there to protect you, wants to make sure that you are safe. But a lot of the times the ego is based off of past wounding and past experiences. And so we can there's many exercises I do, but it's really just simply inviting someone to get out of their mind and just drop into their heart, whether that's feeling into someone that they love, or something that they love about themselves, or something that they connect to so strongly. It's just an instant disruptor into the anxiety taking on and on and on control and completely consuming the experience. And it sounds so easy, but it is so difficult for all of us, because when we are in the mind, we feel like we have some sort of control, but that actually disrupts the flow of I would say in this case, if the medicine is here to meet us and we're trying to control it with our mind, how are we supposed to surrender into what's here for us if we're trying so hard to just control it all with our heads? And so being in the heart, dropping to the body, are all really important. And that's what I work on a lot with people in preparation, because it is so, so needed once the session happens. And then we bring it into the session, or into, if it's a group ceremony, sometimes I'll like just go one by one and place my hand on someone's heart and really allow them to just like feel my hand on their heart, so they can come back to that connection. And then the integration, it's like a lot of people will have I was in so much fear in the beginning, and then I dropped into my body and I was able to surrender, blah, blah, but I don't really remember how that happened. And so it's coming back to showing them and reminding them of the tool that they use, so that they don't forget, and that it's there to remind them in the future when you're in a fear-based state that is non-threatening, that's an exercise and tool that they can continue to come back to over and over again. Because what I see for even ceremony or being in plant medicines is that it is an example of where we are in our everyday lives. So a lot of the times what people struggle with in ceremony is something that's current in their daily life, that I point back to, of like, well, if you had a lot of fear, resistance coming up in this experience, where is that showing up in these other parts of your life, your health, your wealth, your relationships? And so it's just a magnifying glass for them to see where exactly they are. And sometimes we need that guidance and support as a mirror for what's been internally going on, because we all have parts and blind spots that we are not able to see.
So beautifully said. The reminder to drop into the heart. We are such a cognitive, intellectual, mind-based culture, and it's amazing. But the mind is a beautiful tool. It's a terrible master. And
I've
it's
never
so
heard that
true.
before.
I think I heard Tim Ferriss share that from, and I don't know who said it. It's one of those sayings that who can probably trace it back a long ways. Um, and so, yeah, the mind is a powerful thing. It's amazing, but it's actually being it works best when guided by the heart. And
Mhm.
so, remembering that, it's so beautiful to hear you share that because I'm like, oh, we need that reminder constantly because we um we forget. It's so easy to forget when we're just going about in our default mode
Mhm.
state of awareness, just trying to get things done, right? Like feed ourselves and get the kids to school, that sort of thing. But dropping back into the heart like that remembrance is so vital. It's vital to um our survival. It's really it's not a luxury. It's a non-negotiable really and I think prioritizing that, and so cultivating the the settings where we can safely drop into the heart is a piece of that. And so sometimes I characterize it as, going from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state. You and I are in the midst of co-creating an event for exactly this type of thing with like a microdose with psilocybin and sound bath experience to give people an opportunity to really drop into their heart and connect back into that state of consciousness again. Um, because there's so few times and spaces in our modern day lives where we get to really do that. And so sometimes they think of like religious communities going to church on Sunday, for example, used to be what most people did to maybe have an opportunity to connect back to your heart space, either individually or collectively. But you know, church attendance, religious services attendance is at an all-time low for Americans. I think for the first time recently, more than half of Americans don't identify with any particular religion. So there is sort of this piece is missing in our day-to-day lives. And so really it takes intention to seek these experiences out, to cultivate these experiences, kind of on our own right now until a new culture really starts to evolve of that, which I really feel like is growing right now. It's so in its very early stages in our culture. I think Oregon is a beautiful place where a lot of these things are starting to unfold. Um, I was recently reading a journal article that just got published in Nature about looking at is out of Washington University in St. Louis, looking at psilocybin in healthy volunteers, but they did functional MRI studies of their brains on psilocybin. So they were given psilocybin at a few different time points, and they took functional MRI scans. So looking at brain activity, certain areas of the brain that light up at resting state, sort of resting default mode state. And then while in the psilocybin journey, can you imagine being on psilocybin inside of an MRI machine? Like, bless these
I would
volunteers.
die. I would die. No way.
I think one of them was a professor of neurology at WashU in St. Louis, and I was like, "Bless you for volunteering your mind for that. That is must have been quite the trip." And then also looking at the control group, they gave Ritalin to
Mm,
methylphenidate to have like a so-called active control. Um, so the idea being, like to simulate like a state of arousal and there's similar kind of with effects on the cardiovascular system between psilocybin
mm,
and Ritalin in the sense that it elevates heart rate and that sort of thing. And so it was a way to blind people to not know whether or
mm.
not I think or at least to look at the brain states and to compare. Um, like, is it due just to the arousal of the dopaminergic system or what? But anywho, the what was fascinating about the study was that with the psilocybin group, that the obviously the brain lights up in incredible ways, uniquely with psychedelics and so yeah, psilocybin in this case. And interestingly, there was more activity, or rather, there was more overall activity in the brain. So supporting this idea of increased entropy in the brain, maybe being part of the mechanistic explanation for why psilocybin and psychedelics are so therapeutic. Because you can think of it metaphorically as like you're just like shaking up your old your wiring, your old thought loops, whatever habits that you're in. And specifically, there was more decoupling or decreased connectivity between the hippocampus, and specifically like the anterior hippocampus region in the brain, and the default mode network. And so the default mode network being what we call sort of like the brain correlate for the ego, our ego identity, what you're talking about with when we bring up the word ego. And there have been other studies that have sort of proposing this theory that there's this increased connection between the hippocampus and the default mode network. That's been seen in people who have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And so there's this like increased coupling between sort of regions of our brain, certain regions of our brain, and our default, the network of our brain, the default mode network that is responsible for kind of driving our normal resting state of awareness. Um, and psilocybin being able to kind of forcibly, in a medicinal way, decouple these regions. And what's interesting is that the decoupling is persistent for weeks afterwards. So it's basically more evidence to back up the increased neuroplasticity that is available after psilocybin journeys. And so I was really excited to delve into the study and read a little bit more about it, and bring it forth to people who are interested in psilocybin therapy, to show that there is this crucial kind of window after a psilocybin journey for weeks afterwards. And how it's during that time with the increased neuroplasticity that we get to really integrate the insights that come through on the journey, and to make them anchor them into our bodies, into our nervous systems, with repetitive practice every day, to sort of rewire the nervous system, and into new thoughts, new beliefs, new behaviors that actually result in a profoundly different baseline feeling state. And part of what I try to encourage people to do in the preparation phase before a journey is to go ahead and start exploring some sort of practice that you think will be supportive for you, for shifting into a parasympathetic state, for connecting with your heart, for bringing in whatever ways that you're out of balance, what are practices that can maybe bring you into balance. Start exploring that now, before the journey. And then you have the journey experience where so much unfolds, right? Like you can't even begin to condense it down. What happens, and then weave the practice in the integration, and feel what it feels like how much it may have deepened that practice, because you're no longer fighting your default mode network like that, and your ego. And then also, it is an opportunity to really, yeah, like I said, anchor the insights in. And and that will sustain you for a long time. It will also bring you so much more of like a return on your investment for the experience.
Mhm.
And I feel like while I encourage my clients to do that, um, a couple things come up. One is I still feel like there is some relationship with the medicine curing me as opposed
Yeah.
to I'm the one that's going
Mhm.
to cure myself. That, like you said, the medicine simply amplifies what, is already there that maybe we're not quite facing off with.
Mhm.
Um, but then also, so that's an issue. And then the other issue is that, besides feeling like the medicine will cure me, is that the importance of um, the practices to shift the priority from this is something that I will get done after,
Mhm.
you know, I take care of my other priorities on my list to, wow, this has now become the number one priority and I must somewhat seriously protect that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many things about what you just shared that is lighting me up right now. I love that there's research being done on the power of integration in that time window after your peak experience. Because I don't know if it was in this podcast that I shared about this, but I often say like psilocybin, ayahuasca, these plant medicines are, you know, they are the ones to open up the door, but you have to be the one to walk through it. And so it's like, it's not giving your power over to these medicines to be a magic cure, to heal you all the way. It's really knowing that they are a tool and an ally, but your participation in the preparation and the experience and in the integration is so important. And that is like, that will deem the success of your experience. And what I've noticed that is that, a lot of people will reach out to me, will get on an intake call and they just want to have the experience. They want to have it right now. There's a sense of urgency. There's this, I just want, the max dose. And it's like, wait a second, let's pause. Because if there's this much urgency around an experience and you want to have the max, which also doesn't mean that it's going to be a better journey, then there's something here that you're putting too much expectations and power on this experience. Because honestly, the ceremony in and of itself, yes, is of course powerful and important, but 95% of the work is outside of it. And if you can treat your life as a ceremony and continue to develop that relationship with the medicine and with yourself, then honestly, you won't have, it's like we can need these medicines or want to have these medicines for as long as it feels good. But for me, my goal would be to not need to ever need them again, like to get to a point where I don't need to come back and come back and come back so I can do my work. Like, it's like, how can I continue to develop and to unlock those gifts like love or gratitude, sight or intuition that these medicines support me with? How can I develop that within myself so that I don't have to rely or keep showing up back and back and back to ceremony to receive those things? It's like, you know, using them as a tool and only a tool, an ally, only an ally, but not putting all of my power onto them, because at the end of the day, that's just contraindicating everything that they're here to support us with. And so I love all of that you just shared, and it's just wonderful that we are having more research being done. And one thing that I listened to on an Aubrey Marcus podcast yesterday with Robert Kennedy, who is the independent candidate uh, trying to, win the campaign of our presidency this year, is that they had a whole segment around psychedelics. And I don't remember the name of this doctor, but he came on and he said psychedelic medicine is super important and super pivotal for, where we're going with the mental health crisis. And one thing that he is afraid of, that he asked Robert Kennedy to just take a look at, is this over medicalization of the medicine. And that is something that, I continue to have a deep desire and passion about making sure it doesn't happen in these spaces, because yes, with the above ground model, it definitely does make this work more accessible. But if we're treating it like it's a medical treatment versus a spirit, mind, body, and soul like experience, then we're not going to do it justice, and it will begin to completely convolute and do the opposite of what these medicines actually are here to do. And I feel so passionate about bridging the gap between, the ceremonial, magical, shamanic, energetic ways that these medicines work versus just how they cure depression, anxiety, or whatever. Like, there's so much more that that needs to be explored within that realm, that I just think it's important to remember as we move forward in the above ground model, because not only is it, now available for treatment in Oregon, but it's coming to Colorado, it's possibly coming to New York, New Jersey. Like, it's kind of beginning to have an expansion of a mainstream trend, which I think is wonderful. And also, once it kind of goes mainstream and can get in the hands of like these larger systems that don't have our best interest at heart, but just want to make a profit or make money from it, then that's something that we really need to, I would say, is our responsibility as practitioners, as facilitators, as ceremonialists, to really watch out for, and to just continue to share out loud that, we're not here because it's like, it's, a medical model. We are here because it's actually a spiritual model that we are working in. And I think it's really important that a lot of people get more educated on what that is.
You bring up a really good point, and a really interesting one, because I feel like within the psychedelic community, there is a lot of um, wonderful debate that goes on, a very lively, fiery debate about all of these things. Yes, the over medicalization of psychedelics. It's interesting, because the one thing I love about the Oregon model is that it is, and I think this is something that I want to create more content around, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around it, is that because there's sort of legal considerations that we're navigating, regulations. Um, yeah, how do you regulate a sacred medicine like this? All of these things are I personally find fascinating. Um, hence why I'm in this work. But the model in Oregon is specifically adult use, which is different than medicalization. Medicalization of psychedelics would require some sort of credentialed provider to prescribe the medicine. And so this is actually the model that Australia is exploring right now, not with a classic psychedelic or an earth-based medicine, but with MDMA. They have gone the medicalization route, and I suspect that MDMA here, given the nature of the medicine, will be medicalized. It'll be some sort of licensed credential provider. There will be certain, requirements of where and how it's distributed and given, and who actually will be facilitating those experiences. Within the Oregon model, though, with psilocybin, it is adult use. So it's a different model where you do not have to, like in the medicalized model, you do not have to have a diagnosis. And so we're not pathologizing anyone, we're not labeling anyone, we're not forcing you into some box that the DSM likes to categorize people on, which is horrible, honestly, at categorizing the human experience. What I see as just normal human experience that everybody is moving through. And And so you can come and use, as long as you're an adult, 21 or over, you can come and use the medicine for whatever reason you want. If you're just purely curious, beautiful, you can have access to state licensed growers and state licensed, facilities that really dial up the safety and accessibility. I love that we can provide precision dosing. We know exactly how much, psilocybin that we're giving people. We know exactly where it's grown, and so that really does, I think, help people feel really safe. And it's in a licensed service center, again, dialing up safety, not just for clients, but also for facilitators. I think it's really important to highlight that we're not just looking with the licensed service center setting out for the safety of clients, but also for facilitators in its work. Um, and uh, and both the medicalization model, the adult use model, stand separate from the decriminalization model. So decriminalization, just decriminalizes use and possession, but it doesn't allow for any sort of economy to arise. So there's no actual transaction. So if you wanted to provide services for someone and to be able to make a living off of it, you actually can't do that in a decriminalization environment. That is not enough to protect you. And so I do think there's something beautiful about being able to give people an opportunity to make a living off of providing the service of being a trained facilitator with, I think it's for sure a highly skilled service that takes tremendous training and experience and the skills that you cultivate. So beautiful that you can actually officially under the law provide that service and people can pay you for it. Um but then that does still bring up, questions of, I think there's going to be all different models. While I wholeheartedly agree that what we're doing here is actually concerning spiritual health, and
Mhm.
I was talking a little bit about in the pre-show that I've identified that I am most unwell mentally, emotionally, physically when I am spiritually unwell, when I am detached or feeling alone, isolated, separate from the greater living life force energy that moves through me. And whatever it is. And for me, I connect most with the spirit of Mother Nature. And so when I feel deeply embedded within the interconnected web of life, that is when I am most vital. I am my most alive, loving, feel radiant, everything self is when I am just plugged in. And when I don't tend to that, because in my little modern day life, in my comfortable little controlled house, I don't immerse myself into a wild place for a
Mhm.
long period of time, then I gradually feel that wasting away. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I know that there is a huge cohort of people who, as soon as you utter the word spirituality,
Totally.
will run in the other direction and they are like they're allergic to
Mhm.
that word. And I think there is quite a bit of religious trauma. We see, I think a lot of it is related to that. And we live in a world where, materialist scientific advances have brought about incredible advancements, right? So we start to, I think, wrongfully worship at that altar, the altar of science, and forget that there is like this beautiful, with our practice, say like at Eleusia, we've talked about this, that we take a ritualized ceremonial
Mhm.
indigenous honoring approach to medicine work. That there is something about weaving in weaving in the spirit of Mother Earth, which is and however we want to characterize that as like this, you know, this divine source energy, this energy that is greater than any one of us individually and even ourselves as a collective species. Um, that is integral to the healing, the therapeutic healing experience. That there is no healing to be found when we separate that
Mhm.
from the medicine, from the experience. Um, and so it will be really interesting to see how I think there will be a variety of practices that evolve out of within the ecosystem with all different offerings. And I do think it is important to raise our voice to be an advocate um, for these particular expressions or rather advocating for this aspect of healing, particularly when working with earth-based medicines,
Well,
that we can't divorce Mother Earth from the medicines that she provides us.
yeah, I feel like once we do that, then we've lost what her or their intention was for us in the first place, right? And yeah, absolutely. I want to just be clear that there is no one right way to experience a journey or a ceremony. And there are, I would say, practices and rituals that completely enhance the I would say how I'd say this, the overall intention for why these medicines were um, brought to us in the first place. And so that's what I really have passion and focus towards continuing, and to be in integrity towards and to continue to check in with the medicine of like, is this okay? Is this how you would like to be um, connecting to us as a species? Or is there a better way that serves you more? Because at the end of the day, it really is about being in reverence and honoring the medicines that have so generously allowed themselves to reach our hands and our bodies and our hearts and our spirits. And so I think there's so much around here we could do a whole podcast around, but I love that there are just these conversations being had because I think it is important as we continue to evolve and integrate these medicines into our mainstream lives. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, humanity is growing out of a period just recently where, the you know, man is meant to dominate over nature, or, nature is man's dominion, what have you. That was a sort of a rallying cry just a couple centuries ago. And we see the sort of the end effects of
Yeah.
that attitude or that stance against nature instead of with nature. And so a lot of the healing that is, I think so many people are seeing is that we are meant to be in communion with, in a relationship with, uh, an exchange of this reciprocity with our planet, with the other creatures and the plants and the fungi, the other kingdoms that we share this planet with.
Or
And
queendoms.
our queendoms, yes. Yes. Well, yeah, it's like I would love to move through like non-binary view of all of this. Kingdom, queendom, sure. And yeah, well, we are already at time. I feel like, yeah, as usual, the time just flies by. And we didn't even get to talk about so many of the other points that we wanted to touch on, but that's okay. We'll leave them and trust that they'll come through in another time. And thank you so much, Christine Marie, for bestowing your beautiful wisdom on us today.
Thank you for exchanging wisdom with me today. And I'm just so blessed and grateful to have to be building this new friendship with you and this new adventure of co facilitating and holding space for these transformational experiences. So thank you so much for being on this journey with me. And thank you all for being here to listen.
Hello, beautiful people. If you enjoyed the episode, please do hit that subscribe button so you can follow along for more. And it would really light us up if you could leave a comment or a review, maybe share something that really spoke to you and resonated with your heart, or share the episode with a friend or a loved one, or simply hit the like button. And if you're interested in learning more about our work with ceremonial mushroom medicine that's fully legal here in Oregon, please do visit our website at www.eleusiahealth.com. That's ELEUSIA health.com.